Okay, very last set of videos, last chapter to go through. And this is just rounding off, throwing out a few ideas. Okay, I don't think, tested any of this in the exam, but you might find it interesting. And the book, yeah, I really need to update the book. I've actually been doing some research on some of this stuff. It's quite a big research priority for me, some of this stuff, on which we'll get to later. I need to update the book, so sorry about that. But yeah, so this is called Policy for Sustainable Development, but I don't know, that's not really a very good title. I don't know what to call this. It's a bit of a hodgepodge. We're kind of rounding off with a few ideas. So the first set of ideas we're going to look at is called is unsustainability sustainable? So what's the idea here? Well, let's see what we've got on the slides. So what have we got? Assume that the following statement is true. We're getting richer and healthier, but trashing the planet. So what's that all about? That is supposed to be unsustainability, yeah? We're trashing the planet, but we're getting richer and healthier. Is this true? I would claim that it is. I don't think I put any evidence for that out there, no. Are we getting richer and healthier? Well, oh, what's he called? The Swedish guy who died a couple of years ago. He's my friend's, what do you call that? Or whatever, my friend's wife's dad, but he's dead. Oh God, never mind. The fact guy. I got to pause the video. I got to remember his name. Okay, I got it. Hans Rosling. Yeah, Google Hans Rosling and check some of his videos. You don't have to agree with everything he says, but he's pretty convincing. We are getting richer and healthier, and not just in Sweden. In fact, to a much greater extent across the average in the sort of poorer half of the world. If you look at the rates of economic growth, for instance, in India, China, and a bunch of countries in Africa too, they're way higher than they are here, right? And in terms of life expectancy and so on, the rates of improvement are phenomenal in almost all countries, the poorer countries in the world. Are we trashing the planet? For sure, yeah, we're wiping out species, we're changing the climate, etc. Okay. So then, considering the following two hypotheses: one, we rely on services provided by the planet. By trashing the planet, we're destroying the planet's ability to provide these services in the future. Therefore, if we carry on trashing the planet, the loss of these services will lead to us getting poorer and sicker. So this is unsustainability is unsustainable. Okay. If that is the case, then unsustainability is unsustainable. And in the worst case, we might even go over a planetary boundary big time. There'll be a tipping point and we'll all die. Okay, that would be seriously unsustainable. Number two would be we're adaptable and ingenious. Therefore, we can carry on both trashing the planet and getting richer and healthier indefinitely. That is unsustainability being sustainable. So, of course, in this scenario, we will deal with climate change eventually. We might even deal with biodiversity loss or the worst aspects of it in terms of the feedback effects on us. But we'll keep pushing nature into a smaller and smaller part of the planet. We'll dominate more and more, and so on. Okay, I'm afraid that this is the more likely scenario. So what? Well, assume you care about the planet and would like to redress the balance between the pursuit of material wealth and care of the planet. What do you do? One, perhaps you could try and find evidence for hypothesis one or try to convince others that it's true. Or two, you could try to persuade others to care more about the planet too. Okay. And there are other strategies like show that global capitalism is doomed anyway, so we might as well like slow down slowly rather than collapsing. Hypothesis one is great if you can actually demonstrate that it's true. Sorry, strategy one is great as long as hypothesis one holds. Okay, but what if it doesn't? What if you end up crying wolf? Okay, this is the concern. If you're going to say we have to preserve biodiversity because we need biodiversity for all the medicines we're going to need in the future. Okay, this was a classic argument that was made a hell of a lot in the past. It's made, thankfully, somewhat less now. It's what the Swedes would call a very krystat argument. It's like forced argument, really. Because, of course, it might be nice to have all those extra possibilities to find new medicines, but we can find other ways to discover new medicines. You know, we don't have to preserve biodiversity just for that. And of course, if you build all your arguments for preserving biodiversity on arguments like that, and then the scientists come and look, we can synthesize kind of anything we want in the lab, so actually we don't need that biodiversity. So yeah, we can carry on taking out the rainforests, then you're kind of stuffed. Okay, I've got some quotes here. This is just to get you thinking. Yeah, you don't have to agree with me on this stuff, by the way. This is some quotes. The planetary boundaries framework defines a safe operating space for humanity based on the intrinsic biophysical processes that regulate the stability of the Earth system. For the first time in human history, we need to relate to the risk of destabilizing the entire planet. Just because we're not seeing a collapse today doesn't mean we're not subjecting humanity to a process that could lead to catastrophic outcomes over the next century. Okay, so I agree with most of their statement, but I don't know, the whole approach I struggle with. Okay, I hope most of you recognize this. This is Rockström and his co-authors. I think Stefan is the first author of this paper. This is perhaps the most famous paper from this planetary boundaries stuff. But then when you look at these boundaries, and it's like, well, isn't this all a bit arbitrary? I know there's a lot of research behind it, but are we really going to wipe out life on Earth because there's too much nitrogen in the ocean? I don't buy it. Okay. My opinion. Okay. We take it for granted, the world that we love, and we're destroying it so quickly. The light of dawn on the prairie, the silvery flash of fish in a stream, the cry of a hawk over a forest. Everybody has their own ideas of the beautiful, and we'll surely miss it when it's gone. So this seems like the other strategy, yeah, saying, look, we shouldn't preserve nature because we need it for some instrumental purposes. We should just preserve it because it's the right thing to do. This is from Rockström as well. Okay. Here's another one, a very different quote. People are persuaded to spend money we don't have on things we don't need to create impressions that won't last on people we don't care about. Okay, so this is Tim Jackson in a TED talk a few years ago. I'm a bit of a Tim Jackson fan. Okay. This is, to me, this is the other approach. This is, look, we don't need to do all this consumerism and so on. We can make other choices. And we're going to talk more about why are we making these choices. We've talked about consumption patterns. We shift to energy intensive goods over time. We're flying more and more. The income elasticity of demand for flights is like 3. Why is that? Why do we, as we get richer, why do we keep wanting all this stuff? We're going to talk a bit about that. Okay. What have we got here? The regulated market economy has shown a remarkable ability to adapt and react to crises when they arise, including environmental crises. We know that they may often have far-reaching consequences for nature and human welfare sometimes. When the consequences are only for nature, not a lot tends to get done. Consider, for instance, the Baltic Sea or bird populations in Europe. Okay, of course, I mean, there's some consequences from the Baltic. For us, it's not so nice to swim, but it's not like a big deal, and we don't do a lot. Historically, there are examples of civilizations that have collapsed, apparently, as far as we can tell, due to environmental collapse, like Easter Island. What lessons are there here? Well, you can look at papers like Brander and Taylor and so on. A sort of key lesson, which I think we talked about a bit before, yeah, right at the start of the course with the megafauna. It's like, if we're totally dependent on the ecosystem, it's far less likely that we'll make it collapse. Because as it starts collapsing, we're going to notice kind of and do something about it. This is where the tipping points come in as the sort of Rockström. If you're pushing the sort of Rockström story, then you're looking for tipping points, because that is the killer argument. Okay. Financial crises, like, don't hold your breath waiting for capitalism to collapse. Okay, it's the short story on this slide. Of course, I could be wrong. Predicting the future is a super tricky business. Yeah. So like I said, take this. This is kind of my opinions, a lot of this. We haven't talked really at all about distribution in this course. Super interesting and very tightly connected with climate question, of course. Massive, massive relevance to the climate question. So who suffers the most from environmental crises? Of course, it's the people with the least control of technology, the least resources, the least money, from the poorest countries. Who pulls the strings? It's the other guys. Yeah, it's us, the people with all the money and the power. So the climate crisis is, yeah, very tightly linked to the redistributive questions, or questions about fairness and distribution, as you know. So in a socially planned economy with the Kaldor-Hicks criterion, so we're not bothering about distribution, what's the first thing you would do about the climate crisis? You would stop burning coal, right? That would be the #1 priority. Like, we want to get rid of all coal-fired power stations in the next 20 years, something like that. The time it takes to build the alternatives. There would be a massive, massive effort globally, and we would try to leave all of the rest of the coal in the ground, basically. But in the poorest countries, coal is still the cheapest way of getting energy, electricity, which the poor countries need to develop. Okay. So even if the global social cost of carbon might be like $100 per ton of carbon, $30 odd per ton of CO2, emitted to the atmosphere. And that would be enough, if everyone had to pay that, that would be enough to induce everyone to switch out of coal pronto, right? But for that is the global optimal social cost of carbon, but that's not the social cost that people in poor countries in Africa or South Asia would be choosing, right? That's the global choice. If we want them to apply that kind of cost and switch out of coal, we need to pay them. Okay, there's really no two ways about it. We need to compensate them for that. And it's big time, yeah, big time. Because they're going to lose if they all switch out of coal. In their terms, based on their utility functions, they're losing. Okay. Okay. Uncertainty. The global economy will very likely be able to keep going as it has up to now for decades or even centuries. Again, according to me, growing, triggering problems, catastrophes, and then solving them. All the while, the space for non-human or natural world is likely to be circumscribed or cut down ever more by our thirst for consumption of everything from food to wilderness experiences. Okay. Right. Now we're going to change gears. So I think I'll stop this video and we'll have one more video, the last one for this year. Oops. I got to switch controls.